sharp and a little bit, aggressive and sharp, I suppose. And obviously, when you meet that, you can respond with the same kind of energy, and then you fall into that energy, and then you potentially pass that on to someone else, and then they pass it on to someone else, and they pass it on to someone else. Young Pueblo, who I've had on the podcast a couple of times, talked about how we can either have a web of healing or a web of pain. And the web of pain might be that I don't deal with what I'm experiencing within myself. And so unconsciously, I'll pass it on to someone else. So obviously, I thought about that man. And if he's stopping a lot of people in the checkpoint and he meets someone who's given him a lot of negative vibes, or giving him a lot of lip, or just giving him a hard time, it would be easy for him to fall into that energy of being aggressive, or being what's the word? Yeah, being aggressive, I suppose. And so he can easily pass that on and pass it on and pass it on. So again, Young Pueblo talks about how our pain, if we don't transmute it, well, he doesn't use this language, but I've heard this used in the past, that if we don't transmute our pain, we'll transfer it. In other words, if I don't deal with what's going on for me in a conscious way, it's easy to pass it forward. But equally, when I put myself into a good state, when I take care of myself, and part of it is checking in with myself and giving myself what I need. When I do that, there's potential that I can change the course of other people's life, because I'll come into contact and I bring that better energy. I bring that sense of wholeness and compassion and curiosity and whatever else. And so that gives them permission to do the same. So I hope that makes sense. Please share in the chat box, if you will. What was your biggest insight from week 1? Or was there anything in the workbook that jumped out to you? What was interesting for you in terms of reflections from week 1 with the shadow? And again, I really encourage us to use the chat box, because it's a chance for us to learn from one another and to share the collective experience. That's an important part of doing this live. We're doing this over a couple of weeks, is we all have different experiences. So Keen is sharing, to begin to make peace with my judgments, was Keen's reflection from week 1. I'll share my reflection as well after. I get a couple of shares first. Everyone's got to share. I should ask first, did we do our homework? Understanding over creativity, I see. Maybe it's overreactivity. It could be over creativity too. Some of us think we're not creative, but we create problems in our minds. I realize how much I judge myself and believe that I'm judged by others. Yeah, that's a big one for me also. The fear of judgment. The fear of judgment can look different ways. It can be the fear of success. How will I be judged if I'm successful? How will I be judged if I fail? Fear of failure. It always comes back to judgment, and that judgment always comes back to how we judge ourselves, how we see ourselves. I recognize a pattern of being told to be quiet, reserved, speak when spoken to, insight into my limiting beliefs. I'm not important. My voice doesn't matter. Thank you. So again, when we talk about integration and we talk about, what is shadow work, this is the first piece, is the awareness, starting to recognize what are my patterns, maybe where did they come from? And then the difficult work, or the more challenging work sometimes, is the actual work with those beliefs. So as we start to identify these insights, you'll have seen in workbook 1, the last part of the workbook is to sort of catch your reflection. What was your biggest reflection from the week? And then start to notice it in your day-to-day life. So how does this actually show up for me? Another belief there, giving my power away, causing me to feel invisible. And so again, with that piece, I'd be looking on a day-to-day basis as to, okay, someone asks me what I want to do, and I just say, oh, I'm easy, I'll do whatever you want to do. That might be an old pattern of giving away my power, not stepping into my power, not finding my voice. And so my opportunity, when I notice this coming up again and again, is I act in a new way. I do something slightly different, and this starts to form a new belief. So again, week 1, we talked about healing and growth. We said healing is making space for those parts that weren't seen or weren't heard or weren't accepted. And then growth is to develop the parts that maybe we stunted. Last couple of shares, interesting to catch myself falling into patterns, underreacting a lot, judging myself, telling myself stories, catching it. Yeah. So again, first step, catching it, which is amazing. And on a side note, I've been thinking about what is growth? What is real growth? And it can be easy, I think, to set goals Like, and obviously goal setting is useful. Set targets, set things we want to go after, because it feels quite linear and we can feel like, oh, I'm moving toward this, so I'm successful or I'm growing. But oftentimes the things we're moving toward can actually be an avoidance of the actual work that needs to be done. So an example of that, maybe if my piece is around, I need to find my voice and I don't allow myself to speak up, but I set goals and I think that I'm growing because I'm setting goals. In some ways I'm growing, but if I'm not stepping into the piece that's holding me back and I'm not dealing with the wounded part, in some ways I'm almost running away from myself. So this is the real work. And this is why this is challenging, because it's kind of messy. I recognize a pattern. Sometimes I act in a new way. Sometimes I fall back into my old pattern. And so patience is really important. The thing you said about Zen people not dealing with their emotions is very interesting. Pains show another way. Yeah. So again, if people are very relaxed, very Zen, seem very calm, sometimes it depends, how much work you've done on this stuff, but sometimes you'll see, I see yoga teachers who seem super Zen, but you can see in their jaw the tension being held. We'll talk about the body today and how the body holds the shadow or demonstrates the shadow. Sometimes you can see anger being suppressed, and the way that people deal with their emotions is to try go past it and to just bypass it. This is spiritual bypassing. And the idea of, again, wanting it to look clean, wanting it to be linear, instead of actually going into some of the more challenging bits. Okay, last one for now. I found the ABCD exercise really useful. It really made me clear about what my triggers are and realize and have control over how I react. Cool. And thank you for all the shares. I'll share one quick one myself that I've noticed. A couple of weeks ago, I did a breathwork session in Dublin. And at the end of most of my sessions, I'll say that I value feedback and I welcome feedback and I don't take it personal and everything's welcome. It helps me get better. And in a way, when I'm in a grounded place, that feels really good. But sometimes, again, my old pattern of not being enough will come up. So a friend of mine said, yeah, I've got some feedback. I'm busy today, but I'll come back to you tomorrow. And she came back to me 5 days later with feedback. And I definitely had some anxiety around what was she going to say. I had some fear around what she was going to say. So this was an example maybe of, okay, there's some reactivity here from me. There's some discomfort in me around feedback. And part of me wants to say, oh, I don't take it personal. It's not a big deal. It helps me get better. But then there was another part of me. It could be the specific person. It could be many different things. I think it was the specific person generally tells me everything I'm doing is great. So it feels safe to ask them for feedback. So when she said, I've got a lot of feedback for you, I thought, oh, so that's an example of, oh, maybe I'm not as comfortable with feedback as I like to think. Okay, cool. We're going to do a short grounding this morning. We'll do something slightly different. So a little bit of breath work. If anyone is pregnant, I'm going to encourage you to not do the breath holds and to be a bit more gentle with the breath. So I'll take you through briefly what we're going to do. This is a little tool for your toolbox. Last week, we just did a general grounding, a little bit of breath work this week. So what we'll be doing is the 10, 20, 30 breath. What this is looking at is first we take 10 nice, nourishing, deep breaths in. And the breath will be in through the nose. And so we'll be breathing in through our nose. And I want you to try and think about filling your belly and then filling your chest. So it's a really big breath. So it goes all the way in. So I breathe in through my nose to my belly and my chest. So it's all the way in from my belly button right up to my collarbones. And then I let go through my mouth. So the inhale, I pull the breath in. The exhale, I just let it fall away. So it's... So we're going to take 10 of those breaths. And at the end of the 10 breaths, we'll take a 10-second pause. So the lungs will be empty. Well, the lungs are never actually empty, but we'll think about the lungs being empty. And we take a 10-second pause. Then we come into our second round. We take 20 breaths. So big breath in, letting go. Big breath in, letting go 20 times. And then we hold for 20 seconds. Third time, we do 30 breaths and we hold for 30 seconds. And then we have a couple of minutes of just relaxation. Just give me a quick yes if you're comfortable with that in the chat box. This only takes a couple of minutes. And part of what this does is, with shadow work, I think it's important to some degree to get a bit of separation from the ego. So the ego doesn't want to look at the shadow because the ego has a very clear picture of who we are. And it doesn't want to see beyond that because who we are has kept us safe up to this point. So this allows us to shift out of the DMN, default mode network, which is the part of the brain that replays all the same stories time and time again. and has a very clear sense of who we are and how we fit into the world. This gives us a bit of space. This is one of the beauties of breath work, is it allows us to go beyond our current picture of who we are. So I'll have a little bit of music in the background to accompany us. I encourage you, if it's comfortable, to gently close your eyes. Obviously, don't do this if you're driving. Again, if you're pregnant, I just encourage you to be gentler with the breath, so you can just breathe slowly in through the nose and out through the mouth, and don't do the breath pause. So sitting comfortably, gently closing the eyes if that feels okay. And just getting a sense, firstly, of your feet connected to the ground. Maybe gently pushing the feet into the ground, feeling that connection. And let your weight be heavy on the chair or the ground, wherever you are. And you might place one hand down around your navel and one hand up around your heart space. And we'll start relatively slow, and we'll speed it up slightly as we go, but you're always in control. So whatever feels best for you. If you feel ready, we'll start with a nice inhale through the nose, out through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth, in, letting go, in, letting go, in, letting go. 5 more breaths just like this. Feel your belly and chest rise and fall. Two more breaths. Big breath in. Really big breath in, belly and chest. Empty the lungs. And just hold it here now, settling for 10 seconds. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. 20 breaths. Big breath in through the nose. Letting go. In. Letting go. In. Letting go. In. 5. Again, fill the belly, fill the chest, pulling the breath in, gently letting go. 5 more breaths just like this, all the way in, letting go. 3 more breaths. Second last breath in. Big breath in, then empty the lungs. And again, just holding here. Just relaxing here, softening the body. Let the shoulders fall away from the ears. 5 more seconds on the holds. Then we go to our last round of 30 breaths. 3, 2, 1. 30 breaths. Big breath in. Letting go. In. Letting go. Bigger breaths every time. Work, everyone. Stay with it. "15 more breaths, all the way in, easy letting go. Ten more breaths, belly, chest, let go. Five more breaths. 3 more big breaths. Second last breath in. Big breath in, let it go. And just hold it here. Just holding here, softening the body, let the shoulders fall away. And just feel the energy sinking, grounding. You're going to hold for 10 more seconds if you can. If at any point you need to breathe, just breathe, of course. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Keeping the eyes closed. Big breath in. You might let it go with a sigh or a sound. And just keeping the eyes closed. Returning to a regular breath. And just a question for yourself. And don't look for answers. Just see what comes to you. And the question is, what am I avoiding in my life? What am I avoiding in my life? Or what do I push away? What am I avoiding or what am I pushing away? And we take a nice couple of full breaths, nice and slow. So in through the nose, feel the breath coming into the body. Slow breath again out through the nose, slowing down. In through the nose. Slowly out through the nose. In through the nose. Out through the nose. And just pushing the feet gently into the ground again, maybe wiggling the fingers and toes a little. Gentle movement back into the body. And in your own time, going to gently open the eyes, but as ever, don't come straight back to the screen. First, come back to your environment. So have a look around the room, try and pick 2 or 3 items that are close to you. And then see if you can notice 2 or 3 items a little bit further away. And when you feel comfortable, excuse me, you can come back to the screen. There's no rush. And briefly in the chat box, if you're comfortable, you might share how you're feeling, how that was. And if you're comfortable with sharing what came up for you with the questions, or if anything came up for you with the questions, you can also share that, but there's no pressure. So how was that? How do you feel now? Is there any slight difference in your body? And was there any insight that came through with those 2 questions? What am I avoiding, or what do I push away? So this is the 10, 20, 30 breath. Very nice way of calming. As he says, feeling very calm. I've got pushing anxiety and fear away. relaxed and energized, avoiding connection, very relaxed, avoiding love, calm and grounded, avoiding rejection and connection, pushing away love and connection. Thanks for all these shares. I avoid conflict. That's one of mine. I definitely avoid conflict a lot of the time. And that's obviously got its consequences. More connected to my body, avoid confrontation, avoid negative people, feeling lighter. Cool. Okay, so a simple little exercise. Again, it could be a nice daily practice. I actually have a recording that I can send you guys, that I will add to the membership site actually. Avoiding myself because of fear of my surrounding people, avoiding taking action of what I'd love to try. Felt a big release. Avoid being too vulnerable, pushing away help. Cool. Okay. Thank you for these shares. Probably unsurprised. Much more grounded after that exercise. Avoid any situations that I know will put me out of my comfort zone. I'm very distracted at times. Avoid making mistakes. Cool. So probably, as you can guess, the parts that we avoid are in some ways more shadow material. I'm going to really, really briefly recap from last week, just to catch us up to speed, and then we'll move into this avoidance piece. So last week, the first thing that we looked at was what is the shadow, and we talked about shadow and persona. So shadow and persona. Persona is who we become to stay safe in the world. It's the masks that we wear, and we may have different personas depending on our environment, depending on who we're with, where we are, what we're doing. And maybe I have one persona at work, another persona in intimate relationship, another persona with my family. I'm different people in different circumstances based on what I learned. So again, we come into the world, 360-degree personality, everything welcome. But over time, we learn that certain parts are praised and other parts are shamed. So our persona will be largely made up of the things we're proud of. So I'm proud to be certain aspects of myself. And these are the parts that I learned get me praise, approval, acceptance, safety, validation. And then my shadow will be more the things I have been shamed for, the parts I'm shamed of. And we noted last week that the more I have pride in one area, the more likely it is I have shadow in the opposite. So if I'm someone who takes great pride in being a perfectionist, I'll have a huge amount of shame. Or if I should phrase that differently, if I have great pride in someone who gets things right all the time, I'll probably have a lot of shame around ever getting things wrong. Maybe I get really embarrassed, or I feel really small when I get things wrong. So the more we identify with one aspect of ourselves, the more we'll tend to disidentify with the other. And so again, as we start to recognize how we like to be seen, you might notice, I like to be seen as a grounded and calm and compassionate person. And so then I have a difficulty with myself when I'm anxious, or when I'm judgmental, or when I'm these other parts. So this is my shadow. And these are the parts that I'm wanting to make peace with, because I'll otherwise be running away from myself. Because again, all emotions, all parts serve a purpose. There's a reason we are the way we are. So if part of my shadow is the fear of getting things wrong, there's a reason I have that. There's a reason that that's there. So this was the first piece that we looked at last week, how we come into the world, how we're shaped. And we talked then about the 3 spheres of influence, 3 spheres that can start to really shape this. We said family is the first kind of contact that we have with other people. And an interesting piece to mention, a couple of people there noted in the chat box that there's a fear of connection, fear of love, fear of getting too close, fear of being seen, fear of being judged. So the reason we have these fears is because we are wounded in connection. So our wounding happens in connection to other people. But the reverse is also true. Our healing also happens in connection to other people. I noted this during the pandemic, where I was doing a huge amount of inner work, a huge amount of kind of working on my wounds and whatever other way you want to put it. But I also recognize that there's a certain amount I can do on my own. I can figure out, why I'm afraid of people. I can figure out why I get anxious in social settings. I can figure out all that stuff. but that's all on my own. Then when I step into connection, this is why relationship can be one of the best ways to grow and to heal. And one of the illusions we can have, I think, is that when I've healed, when I've done my work, then I'll find relationship. I think a relationship will always bring about, our intimate relationship will always bring about the wounds, because we're reminded of our primary caregivers. We'll talk about that maybe in the next 2 weeks with how shadow shows up in intimate relationship. So we're influenced by our family, then we're influenced by maybe school and social life, and then we're influenced by society at large, or the culture, I should say, that we're raised in. So culture, we said, is things like religion, the media, our gender, all these different things. Third thing we talked about last week was projection and reaction. We said these are two ways that we can start to see our shadow showing up. So reactivity, which we mentioned, and projection. Okay, so reactivity and projection are two ways that we can start to see our shadow material being activated. So when we react in situations, I mentioned there, my friend said they're going to give me feedback, and it took 5 days for me to hear from them again. And there was a part of me that got fearful. There was a bit of reactivity in me, wanting to reach out, wanting to lean in, getting a bit anxious, wanting someone to tell me it's okay. This was pointing me to some shadow. And again, projection is when I see things in other people that give me an emotional reaction, be it positive or negative. We said that the parts of myself that I disown, that I see as bad, I will tend to judge people for. So if I think people are greedy and misogynistic and X, Y, and Z, I'm going to put those on people that I don't appreciate. And then if there's parts of myself that were kind of golden shadow, so again, if I was told, don't be too loud, don't be too creative, don't be a show off, all this kind of stuff, sometimes there's great parts of myself, really helpful creativity, all these different parts that I put into shadow. So these will tend to be the heroes that I look to in life. And then the parts here will tend to be the villains. And a lot of the shadow work piece is to go and recognize our projections, and one by one, take these back. Take all these things back. And what happens when we take all these things back is, rather than putting people up or down, we see people side by side. Ram Dass, who's the guy behind me on the picture, who's my spiritual hero, guru, says that the best thing I can do for you is work on me, and the best thing you can do for me is work on you. So as I own my projections, as I make peace with my judgments, a couple of people mentioned judgment in the check-ins, I can start to see people on an even keel. And when I'm on an even keel, life is no longer a competition, and I don't need to be fearful. Now I can come from a more grounded place, and I can do the things I want to do rather than doing the things I feel I have to do. Bit of a side note, but I like this concept that, like, we would have traditionally grown in smaller communities. And so you'd have maybe 100 people in the village. And if there's 100 people in the village, it's quite a small tribe of people. And so the thing that keeps human beings going, the thing that kept us alive for so long, is our collaborative efforts, our collaboration. We're not that fast. We're not that strong. We're not that anything else, relative to the rest of the animal kingdom. But we learn to collaborate and work together, and to have specialists in different areas. And so if you have 100 people in a village, you've got 100 people with 100 different roles or more. So you've got the doctor, you've got the baker, you've got the artist, you've got all these different people, and everyone's got a role. And because everyone's got a role, everyone's got a purpose. So everyone's got a purpose. And because everyone's got a purpose, everyone's important. But the interesting thing with the purpose is not about yourself so much as it is, how does this contribute to the village? Quick yes, if this is making sense on some level. This means that I'm needed, that I'm important within the village. And so is everyone else. And so I appreciate everyone else now. I appreciate everyone that's in the village. Obviously, the world has changed quite a bit, and now we're in these huge environments, particularly with the internet, where there's thousands, there's millions, there's so many different people. And now maybe my purpose isn't acknowledged quite as much. And so it can be easy to get competitive and try to get ahead. And when I live my life competitively, it comes from a place of I'm not enough, I'm not important, I don't have purpose, I don't have meaning, I don't contribute in some way. And it's just a kind of side that I thought I would mention. So this was week 1. Any questions on that so far, or just type all clear if you're somewhat clear on what I've shared here. The last piece maybe that's important to come back to again is just to note that the reason parts went into shadow. Cool. The reason parts went into shadow is because they were shamed in some way. Shame is that kind of shrinking feeling of not being enough. And so as we start to explore these parts of ourselves, again, important to meet shame with self-compassion. So if I was told, don't get above your station, don't stand out, don't be a show-off, and I go and I do something that puts me out of my comfort zone, and I hear that voice in my head saying, oh, you're being a show-off. It can be easy for shame to come up on me. I need to meet that with self-compassion. Okay, cool. So let's move from there to, I want to add a third piece in terms of how we can identify some shadow material. So let's call this noticing shadow. So we mentioned the first two last week. We said that our reactions are very clearly a sign of shadow being activated. And there's a great phrase that says, the body remembers what the mind forgets. The body remembers what the mind forgets. So the first couple of years of our life, those first couple of years where we start to form our worldview, maybe our memories of that are not as strong because we don't have perspective, we don't have context, we don't have rationality, we don't have our cognitive functions developed. We're very emotional beings in those first couple of years. And so again, when an emotion is experienced, there's physical sensations in the body. And there's a phrase that said, our issues store our tissues. Our issues store our tissues. So later in life, when we find ourselves reactive reactions tend to be discomfort in the body. So there's discomfort in the body. You might notice, there's certain people and they just irk you. They just annoy you. They just create a reactivity in you. And so this is maybe an implicit memory. So again, a memory that's not remembered explicitly in the mind, but it's remembered by the body. So our reactions and also our underreactions. Someone noted that, underreactions. So when I find myself not reacting, if people are mistreating me and walking all over me and I kind of just take that and I don't react in a appropriate manner, this can be another example. Second was projections. So we said the projections that we hold toward other people, putting people on pedestals, putting people in the pit is another example. And then the third one, which we touched on with our meditation today, so this is the new one we're introducing this week, is the idea of avoidance. Where do I avoid in life? What am I avoiding in life? What do I avoid in life? So we're going to be exploring this in the workbook this week, the avoidance piece. And a few people got, some really clear insights coming through there. I think we'll take I'm going to give you a couple of prompts here. We're just going to take a couple of minutes. This will be expanded on in the workbook this week, but I want to introduce it and see if we can, again, harvest and collect some insight from the group. Actually, I'm going to give you some music. So if you got pen and paper, a couple of journaling prompts or sentence stems here to explore this piece. So in terms of avoidance, again, to keep ourselves safe, there's certain things that we avoid in life. And again, meeting this with compassion. With pen and paper, the first question I'm going to prompt, and here's the key with this. With journaling, there's different ways to journal. Some people journal in a kind of very formulaic way, and they try to get it right, and they try to make it neat and tidy and logical, make sense and all this kind of stuff. So this is okay. But another way of journaling is to just go stream of consciousness, which means keep the pen moving. So we're going to do some sentence stems here. Sentence stems, I'll give you a stem, something to start with, and I just want you to write. And it'll just be about 2 minutes on each stem. I want you to write down anything that comes. Just keep the pen moving. That's the key. And if you get to a point where you don't know what to write, just write down, I don't know what to write, and then see what the next thing that comes, next thing that comes, next thing that comes. And that's how we're going to approach it. So you're not going to be, this doesn't need to look a certain way. So the first stem is to ask the question, where in my life am I not telling the truth to others? So about 2 minutes. Where in my life am I not telling the truth to others? And just keeping the pen moving. Where am I withholding the truth from others? Just one more minute on this one. Where do I withhold the truth with others? Another way you could think about this is, what do I not want others to see or know about me? And now to our next prompt. Where in my life do I withhold the truth from myself? Or where do I lie to myself? Where am I lying to myself? Where am I lying to myself? Or where am I not telling the truth to myself? And again, just keeping the pen moving. Don't worry about getting it right. The act of keeping the pen moving helps us to move more beyond the conscious and into the unconscious. Where am I lying to myself or withholding the truth from myself? It could be, where am I making justifications? Where am I making rationalizations? But where am I withholding the truth from myself? And again, if there's something there and you don't want to write it down, recognizing, okay, that's shame, that's me trying to stay small, that's a younger part of me, just let yourself write the piece. You can scribble it out after or burn it or whatever. Just one more minute on this one. Where do I withhold the truth from myself, or where am I not being honest with myself? And now the next piece, second last piece for now, looking at your answers from the first two questions, what are you trying to avoid? So by withholding the truth, with effectively lying, either implicitly or explicitly, what are you trying to avoid? So if I'm not telling my partner that I'm unhappy, what am I trying to avoid? Conflict, maybe vulnerability. If I am lying to myself about how much effort I'm putting into life, what am I trying to avoid? Maybe I'm avoiding taking full responsibility. What am I trying to avoid by withholding the truth with myself and others? And again, just about 2 minutes on this one. What am I looking to avoid by withholding certain truths? In other words, by hiding parts of myself from myself or from others. And if you're avoiding doing the exercise, that could be Actually, that will come in the next piece. Last 30 seconds here. What am I looking to avoid? And trusting whatever you're writing is just right and it's perfect and it's enough. And last piece, looking at what you're avoiding. What are you afraid would happen if you didn't avoid these things? What are you afraid would happen if you didn't avoid these things? So if I'm avoiding connection, what am I afraid would happen if I leaned into connection? If I'm avoiding taking responsibility, what am I afraid would happen if I took full responsibility? What's the fear there? I'm avoiding a difficult conversation. What am I afraid would happen? And 1.5 more minutes. And just leaving the pen down whenever you're ready. Again, feel your feet connected to the ground, bum resting in the chair. Just take 3 nice nourishing breaths. So go in through the nose and let it go with a sigh if you can. Breath in. Let it go with a sigh. Again, let your shoulders fall away. Have a little wiggle or movement in your body if you need to. And last one, breathing in. And letting go of any tension with your last exhale. Okay. So this was a short intro to one of the exercises in this week's workbook. Is there any insights we want to share in the chat box? We'll be very welcome if there is. So again, one of the ways that we will avoid certain aspects of ourselves is by withholding, and it can be withholding from other people. It can also be withholding from ourselves. There's the idea of that we all, and again, please share in the chat box as I'm continuing to talk here. I talk about this with inner child work, that we all mature biologically, so we get older, but sometimes psychologically we get stuck in youthful or adolescent psychology. So we might be grown adults, but we may find certain aspects of our psychology is still stuck in younger self. And so one example of that might be taking responsibility. So as a child, maybe I don't have to take full responsibility, but as an adult psychology is to take full responsibility for where I am, for what I'm doing, for how I show up in life. And maybe I notice that I avoid responsibility. So there's a part of me stuck in younger years. Again, if there's any insight, please do share in the chat box, but of course, no pressure. Or if there's a lack of clarity and any questions needed on that, please do. We'll need a bit more time, so you'll get a bit more time this week to have a look at that. So one example for me might be where am I lying to myself? It could be in saying that I'm living a healthier lifestyle than I really am. That might be a lie that I tell myself sometimes. And what am I avoiding in that? Maybe it could be as simple as I'm avoiding the discomfort of not eating junk food. And what would happen if I didn't avoid eating junk food, if I ate healthy foods? and then I can explore that. Okay, well, if I was eating healthy foods, maybe people would judge me for being a health freak. Maybe my friends that aren't as healthy would ridicule me or shame me. Maybe I would effectively, if I stop telling myself lies and I live my truth, if I'm honest, here's some examples coming through. I don't tell anyone how unhappy I am with my life. Okay, so we avoid share that we're unhappy because maybe there's a part of us that feels weak and we don't want that part to be seen because we're afraid that we'll be judged if we're seen. So what would happen if I shared that I'm unhappy and that part of me was seen? And then we notice the fear there. Maybe the fear there is that people will ridicule me or reject me or people will abandon me. But of course, on the flip side, there could be a very different result. It could be that people step in and the people it's funny, I got feedback from someone a few years ago. I did this exercise that you would write out a couple of questions. I can share this if people are interested in, I can share it, but you get a couple of you get a couple of questions to help get a 360-degree view of yourself. So obviously we see ourselves for how we are. We are in our own ego, we're in our own way of seeing ourselves, but people see us very differently. So I did this exercise and I asked people, ask some friends to tell me what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, where I'm falling short, where I'm out of integrity, where they see me saying I want one thing and doing the opposite. And I got feedback from lots of people. And to my surprise, one of my friends, she came to me and she said that I always seem like Superman to her, that I never seem like I have struggles or problems, because she says I never say when I'm struggling. Anytime she checks in with me, I'll say, oh, I'm good. But I'll also say, I was struggling last week, but now I'm fine again. And she'll say to me, well, I was talking to you last week and you never. So she said, because her judgment of me was that I was Superman, and she was afraid to come to me with her problems because I never showed her any of my problems. And that came as a surprise to me because I thought it was an open book. So this could be an example of where I do open up and I do share a part of myself that feels edgy or vulnerable. Sometimes it can be met with reciprocity, and it can open up freedom for that person to share. And now we connect on a whole different level. I've always had too much responsibility. Now I think I'm responsible for everything. There's part of me still stuck from childhood, and I thought I had to let go. And that resentment and blame that came with it, there's still parts stuck there, not sharing it with those that are close to me, fear of shame, fear of not being enough. I don't like to be seen as vulnerable, as it's seen as weak. Okay, so again, in that example, maybe the vulnerability, if people think that we're really strong, this could be, again, an example. One of my stories over the years has been that I'm not supported, that people don't care about me, all this kind of stuff. But I also recognize how I keep myself in that by being the strong guy and being the guy who's got it all together. And then I wonder why people don't reach out. So it's for me, at least, it seems to be cyclical. Okay, so again, I'm going to encourage you to go a little bit deeper on that exercise throughout the week. The lie I tell myself at times is that I'm not consciously repeating patterns, but maybe I do because it's easier and familiar, even that, and I don't have to be more vulnerable. That's a good share that's a share I resonate with a lot. So yeah, it's a lie that I'm not consciously repeating the same behaviors. But I spoke to friends that'll say, they'll talk about they're not good on the drink, they're not good with alcohol, it doesn't suit them, and they just keep saying that. But then there'll be justifications and lies that they tell themselves to stay in that. And equally, I do the same in certain areas of my life. So that's an example of a part of you knowing that something needs to change, but then a part of you justifying it. Thank you all for the shares. There's a question around projections, so I just want to briefly touch on that, and then we'll keep moving. We're almost an hour in. I don't know where the time goes. So just to clarify in the projection piece, I hope my drawings help. So again, if I come in and all of me is welcome into the world, but then I have some early experiences that lead me to feel like, okay, well, maybe certain parts aren't welcome. So let's say here's how we do it. Okay, briefly do this. Hopefully I don't confuse matters. I say I've got the good box and the bad box as a child. And so in my first couple of years, in the good box, I put the things that win me love, praise, and approval. So I noticed that when I am smart, when I'm quiet, when I am caring, when I am, let's see, what else? Help me out here. What else is good to be? What were we told we were good to be? Easygoing, helpful. Yes, thank you. Helpful. Helpful is the one coming through there. So I learned that these parts of myself are good. So this becomes like the way I like to see myself. I like to see myself as these things. I like to portray myself as these things. If I'm not being these things, I'll find lies or I'll find ways of hiding these things. Now, then there'll be stuff in the bad box. So again, the bad box can be comprised of things that I notice people withdraw love when these things are shown. So if I'm angry, maybe that goes into the bad box. In other words, goes into shadow. If I am sad and my friends don't want to be around me, maybe I decide you're not supposed to be sad. If I am outgoing, so this can be an example of golden shadow. So outgoing, maybe in certain households, don't be so ahead of yourself, or maybe in certain cultures, stop putting yourself out there. And so all these parts that we reject, we don't want to see these parts in ourselves. We don't want to demonstrate them. We don't want to show them. But projection is the idea that the way the world operates is when we meet people that remind us of these traits, we'll be triggered, we'll be reactive, we'll be shown the parts of ourselves that we haven't made peace with. Another example of this is, I used to say that if you call me a blue dinosaur or a purple polar bear, or I'm not going to take any offense to that. I'm not going to take any notice of that. It doesn't mean anything to me. But if you call me someone who's cocky, and that kind of irks me or irritates me, this is an example of shadow. So like there's a reason that that's irking me. Maybe I haven't made peace with that part of myself because there's some reactivity there. But back to the projection piece, all the things that I put in the bad box, the gold and the dark, I will start seeing outside of myself. So if I'm not willing to look at it within myself and see it within myself, I'll see it outside of myself in my projection. So again, projection is if I have judgments toward other people that are quite extreme and quite emotionally charged. So generally how they look is I shame people and I look down on people, or I judge people in a negative way, or I put people on pedestals and I judge them in a positive way. And again, this is why I call it kind of heroes and villains. Heroes and villains. So if I don't like people that I think are phony and that really irks me, there's possibly shadow in me. So these people are mirroring. This is effectively how we can think about projection. People are, I don't know why I just drew this one, but people are mirrors to me. So the phoniness I see that irks me in other people is an invitation for me to consider, where am I being phony in my life, or where potentially could I be phony in my life? And as I come to understand that and I say, oh, well, I'm phony in certain areas where I withhold my truth, and I recognize the reason I do that is to keep myself safe, then maybe I've got less judgment on other people because I recognize, oh, maybe they're trying to keep themselves safe too. And then if I notice people that I have on pedestals, I'm like, wow, I like people that are adventurous. Maybe I recognize that I want to be adventurous too. There's a part of me that wants to be adventurous too, but I don't allow myself because that was put into shadow in some capacity, because I was taught that you had to be safe and you had to stay in a small box. And so again, if I can see the people that I admire, I can ask, what is it about them I admire? And I can bring that back to myself. I can reclaim that part of myself. And now I can have admiration for them, but I'm not putting them above myself. So projection is about, can I take people off the pedestals, and can I take people out of the pit, and can I start to see people as they are, same as me, dark and gold, brown and shadow. Just give me an all clear if people are with me on that. Particularly Rob, I think it was Rob that asked the question. Cool, thanks Rob. Super, okay, cool. I was take a short break, but I might keep rocking if that's okay. We'll do another little piece, and then we'll do a really quick water in, water out break. So toilet and kitchen for some water if you need it. So the next piece that we explore this week in the workbooks, the next piece we're going to be looking at is a little bit around inner critic. So we all have an inner critic, I think. If anyone doesn't, let me know how you manage that. Inner critic is the voice in our head that oftentimes gives us negative stories, negative beliefs, negative self-views, beats us up, holds us back, keeps us stuck. Something I've drawn for many years is a graph from cognitive behavioral therapy that you've probably seen in the past. And this effectively tells us that our thoughts, the things that we think, the stories that run through our heads, have an impact on how we feel. My feelings then have an impact on how I act. The actions I take, and my actions, of course, have an impact on the results that I see in my life. So when the thoughts are those of my inner critic, it oftentimes holds me back. It keeps me stuck. It keeps me stuck in cycles. So as an example, one of my narratives for years with the inner critic was, I don't fit in. I'm kind of weird and I don't fit in. So my inner critic tells me that. And when I have that belief, I feel unworthy. I feel weird, if that's a feeling. And when I feel unworthy, my tendency is to isolate. So my action is to isolate. And when I isolate myself, I don't connect with people. And when I don't connect with people, this reinforces my belief. So my belief gets stronger again. And I believe this even more now. So the more fuel we give to these thoughts, the more our inner critic can run the show. Now, I often say that most people in life tend to put their emphasis on the results that they want. So this is like, what goals am I going to achieve? So people are obsessed with goals, of course. What results am I going to create? And people think about, how do I do that? So they think about habits. So habits and goals. What is less looked at and maybe less acknowledged is the thoughts and the feelings, or the stories and the feelings. So I think if you start to shift the stories and the feelings and understand them more from a more well-rounded lens, now you see yourself differently. And when you see yourself differently, you do different things. When you do different things, you get different results and you rewrite your scripts. So with the inner critic, the thing that happens, this is true of many of our stories, is we become fused with the inner critic. And by fused, I mean we become that. We think that we are that. So the inner critic takes over. This story that the inner critic plays, which is effectively a I am not enough story, we think that's who we are. So we become fused. I think not enough. It's my inner critic. What we want to try and do through this work is move from fusion to intimacy. So fusion to intimacy. Fusion is when I am the thing. Intimacy is when there's a little bit of space between me and the thing. So being intimate with someone, you don't become that person, but there's two separate things. So, if I'm intimate with someone in my life, hopefully we don't become fused and become the same person and not know ourselves. There's a little space between the two of us. When people become enmeshed or people become codependent, then they become the same person, or they let their partner's feelings dictate how they feel, all that kind of stuff. This is fusion. So again, as we begin to work with the inner critic and we do this work, what we're looking to do is move from this state of fusion where we think we are, our beliefs and our stories, to creating some space and understanding where those beliefs and stories may have come from. So now there's me. I want to call it me. There's my whole self, we'll say. And then there's my inner critic. And having this little bit of space where I recognize that I am not this person. I am not the critic. I'm the person that can see the critic, allows me to get a little bit clearer. Okay. Now, that in mind, when does the inner critic show up? Generally, the inner critic will show up when our wounds, or when our wounds are activated, or when we're close to our wounds. When our wounds are activated or we're close to our wounds. So in our younger years, we've talked about it. There's certain things that happen, activating events, things happen, and we form beliefs. So A, B, activating event is A, belief is B, two separate things. So there's an experience, and then there's a meaning that we give to our experience. So if a parent leaves and doesn't come back, I will give that a belief. And we need to consider that when we're kids, there's a narcissism, or there's a narcissistic quality to us. A lot of the world revolves around us in our early years. And so we assume that anything that happens is our fault, or it's because of us. We don't see the context again of maybe our parents are arguing and they're having a hard time. We don't see all that stuff that's going on. We have an assumption that we've done something. Okay, so if a parent leaves, maybe the belief that I form is the people I love the most walk away. Okay, people I love the most walk away, as an example. So this becomes the wound. People leave. People always leave. I'm going to keep it simple as that's the wound. People always leave. Okay, so I've got my wound. If I get into an experience of this being triggered, or this coming close, or me feeling this fear of abandonment, and I recognize I'm going through a few bits here, so the workbook will help with clarification and bringing this home. But if my wound is this fear of abandonment, oftentimes when experiences come into my life that allow potential for abandonment, so maybe I get into intimate relationship and we're getting closer, but then I quote unquote self-sabotage, or I do something to sabotage that relationship, my inner critic comes in, and my inner critic has something to say. So start getting close to someone, and maybe my inner critic says, you don't know how to love people. You don't know how to love people. Maybe that's a narrative of my inner critic. Quick yes if people are with me thus far on this. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting note there. The things I'm avoiding can fit into either conflict or vulnerability. So they'll say in relationship, the two things that we tend to fear in relationship are there's a fear of vulnerability, which is when like someone gets too close. And so my reaction might be to push people away. So that's the fear of vulnerability. I'm afraid you're going to see me and see more of me than I want you to see. There's the fear of vulnerability. So I'll push you away. So kind of an avoidant attachment style. And then there's the fear of too much separation. So if there's too much, that's all right, Nate. If there's too much separation, then there's the fear of abandonment. So the fear of avoidance, or sorry, the fear of vulnerability, being too close, the fear of abandonment, being too far away. So this is the anxious attachment, where I'm anxiously wanting to reach into the person or reach to the person if they're not reaching for me. And then there's a disorganized attachment, which is where there's confusion. Don't know what I want. So sometimes I'm feeling fearful because someone's too close, then they start to move away. Now I'm fearful because they're moving away. So all this being said, rather than seeing my narratives of my inner critic as being who I am, we're trying to create that fusion, and we're recognizing, okay, these narratives are informing me of where my wounds live. And as you go through the worksheet this week, the workbook this week, you'll start to have a better understanding of this and how it applies for yourself. Okay, so this is an important piece here. Inner critic has stories. It's easy to think and take them as fact and let them run our lives. But when they run our lives, we live in these circles. Okay, so we create the same results time and time again. But if we can create a little bit of space and move to intimacy, seeing our critic as something slightly separate to ourselves that's there in some way trying to keep us safe. So coming back to this example, if I've had the activating event of a parent leaving in my younger years, and my belief is that people always leave, if I get into a circumstance or a situation in my life where I'm getting close to someone and there's an unconscious fear or belief that people are going to leave, then my inner critic's going to jump in, and they don't want that to happen again. So they're going to come up with their narratives that are there to try and keep me safe. This is a new way of understanding my inner critic. Okay, I'm going to suggest a short break. Before we do that, can you just share one insight in the chat box or any questions before we take a really short break? So an insight or a question, right on time. The battery goes low on the pen. So one insight or any questions before we take a really short break, because we've got plenty to keep going through. So in the workbook this week, you'll be able to identify some of the narratives that come up for you. The narratives that will come up for you, and then you'll be able to recognize some of the origins, recognize what are the woundings. Never realized how judgmental I am. So we're all judgmental. We're all judgmental. Yeah, that's what the mind does. So having an awareness of the judgments is important. Insight, getting space between me and my inner critic will be tough. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So effectively what we're looking to do is recognize that every part of us, the inner critic, the inner saboteur, the perfectionist, all these parts are trying to keep us safe in different ways, the best they know how. But we need to update their operating system sometimes. Like maybe in my youth, when I had no control over situations, my inner critic telling me that I wasn't good enough and I didn't fit in, that was the best it knew. But now as an adult, I've got new ways I can show up. I learned when I'm too emotional, I'd be sent to my room or isolated. I could be with family and around others when I was easier or well-behaved. How do you deal with the wound? We'll come to that. We'll come to that one thing. Thanks. And I like the idea of creating space for my inner critic. I get lonely when people move away or abroad. I think it's to do with a feeling of abandonment as a child. Yeah. So just on that one, if again, as a child, I don't have the capacity to recognize what I need and to give myself what I need. So generally our needs are met through someone else. So if I feel lonely, oftentimes as a child, I'll reach out and I'll want to connect with someone. If there's no one there to connect with, maybe I learn to connect with food, or I learn to connect with video games, or I find these strategies of connection because there's no one there. So I find something to go to that allows me to connect. And that becomes my way of connecting later in life. I have an emotional attachment now to food, that when I feel lonely, I go to food, for example. But again, when we think about this updated psychology, this childhood, adolescent, and adult psychology, and moving into a more conscious way of being, I think it's about recognizing that I can meet my needs in healthy ways. I couldn't do it as a child, but now the invitation is, and life is giving me these challenges, and life is activating my wounds because it's saying, okay, I feel like you're ready now. This is my way of thinking about it. I feel like you're ready now. Pat, I'm going to give you this challenge because now you're ready. And every time I meet the challenge, I can react in the old way, or I can try something new. Okay, everyone, 3-minute break. Actually, before we do that one, everyone's I'm going to encourage you to stand up and just shake a little bit. So just shake the body out a little bit. Sometimes we're in our heads, or we can feel a little bit heavy from this type of work. Shake for another 15 seconds. Don't be shy. Okay, 3-minute break. Water in, water out. If you have questions you want to send in privately, they're very welcome. And I'll throw on a little song and we'll be back very shortly. Well done, guys.
I will write you letters that explain the way I'm thinking now. I will return to you what I have taken long before. I will return again when it gets dark and day is done. And lay me down in the hallowed ground, down by your side I will stay. So lay me down. And if you wanna stay with me, then let me know before it's light. I will recoil myself into the black and darkest night and lay So lay me down. And lay me down in the hallowed ground, down by your side I will stay. So lay me down.
Okay, back in 1 minute, if we can. If you can hear me, back in 1 minute.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend.
30-second warning.
I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride if I have things you need to borrow.
Now, okay. I don't know if anyone's into the playlist, but I will share the playlist in the chat box just in case. Cool. Okay, great. Okay. I'm going to decide what will I do next. Kind of 3 other bits I'd like to share today. Again, if there's questions, please don't go. Please don't be quiet. If you have any questions, just ask. Okay, so there's 3 other bits. Let me know in the chat box. Do you want me to do you want to do an exercise right now? If you're watching the replay, you've got no say in this, but if you're live, would you like to do a short written exercise, or would you on fear, or would you like to see a piece on the mind-body connection? We'll be doing both. It's just a case of which would you rather do first, exercise or exercise. My poor little heart, they don't want to hear me. Don't care about me and me share. Exercise, loads of interest in exercise. Cool. Okay. I love this exercise. I think it's really, really wild. I do something called morning pages. That's not what we're doing right now, but I'll just share briefly. Morning pages called The Artist's Way. And The Artist's Way was written by a lady called Julia Cameron. And it's basically a 12-week program for unlocking creativity, and it's a spiritual program for understanding yourself more. But there's 2 main parts to it. You probably don't need to buy the book, but it could be something worth looking into if you're interested. But effectively, morning pages is every morning you get up, and the first thing you do is you write through 3 foolscap pages, and you just brain dump. So whatever's on your mind goes on paper. Some mornings you've got loads of stuff on your mind. Other days you don't know what to say, and so you write down, I want coffee, and I don't know what to say. And then something else comes to you, and then something else comes to you, and something else comes to you. And you just keep writing for 3 foolscap pages. You can type, of course, but I think writing is more powerful where possible. So it's a really useful practice. But again, as I mentioned earlier, part of it with journaling is the idea that if I'm really neat and tidy and I'm trying to get it right, and question of why 3 pages. 3 pages, I think her idea with 3 pages is the first page is kind of a battle. It's like starting going to the gym or going for a walk or whatever. The first bit, you're just a bit like, ugh, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I've entered in my mind. So first page is a bit of a battle, so you get through that. Second page, actually, first page is not as bad. Second page can be a bit of a battle. And then third page, you kind of get to the juice. So Ed Sheeran had this quote, or this analogy I shared often, that he said, someone asked him, how do you write good songs? And he said, writing good songs is a case, he says, like turning on a dirty old tap that hasn't been used in a while. And so you turn it on and it spits out dirty water for a while. And then you have to leave it to run for a while. And after a while, once it's spat out all the dirty water, it gets to the good stuff. So I think the 3 pages is kind of similar. First few pages, you're writing whatever's at the top of your mind. And then the second page, maybe you're battling a little bit. And then third page, you're getting to the good stuff. So it's a really interesting process. Lots of great stuff can come up. I just mentioned it for the main purpose of saying that one of the things she talks about, and another lady called Natalie Goldberg, who's also a writing coach for spirituality stuff. They talk about when you write, oftentimes there's the writer, so there's the person writing, but then there's a judge. There's like a judge in your head who's judging whether it's good or it's bad or it's right or it's wrong or it looks good or whatever it is. And they say that like the part that gets in the way for most of us is the judge. So I start journaling and my judge is saying, oh, I don't know if this makes sense. Oh, this is not neat. This is not tidy. The judge is in the way. And so with the morning pages, you're just scribbling. You just keep writing. You don't reread it. And you're trying to get rid of that judge, which allows you to go beyond the ego and how you see yourself and to get a more expanded version. I hope that makes sense. The reason I bring it up, and just I suppose finish off that loop that's in my mind, morning pages every day, 3 pages. And then the second part of the artist way of that program is to once a week go on an artist date, which is effectively where you bring yourself on a date and you do something creative. It could be anything, just something that inspires you to get outside of your day-to-day life and do something different. And over 12 weeks, it's a pretty amazing program. But the exercise we're going to do, the reason I bring all that up is I really encourage you with this, again, like earlier, to just let the pen move, and trust yourself and try to recognize, again, you have a writer, the one that's going to move the pen, and then you've got a judge, which is like the inner critic in your head that's saying, this is not good enough, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't, whatever it is. Try to let the judge move to the side. The best way of doing that is just keep the pen moving. So this is called the Deepest Fear Inventory. Deepest Fear Inventory. It's a short exercise. We'll give it 5 minutes here. Again, it's in the workbook, so you can give it a little bit longer. Deepest Fear Inventory. And what this is about is unearthing some of our unconscious fears. So unearthing some of our unconscious fears. So what we'll be doing is, the first piece of this is to think about something you'd really like in your life, something you'd like to be, or something you'd like to create, or something you'd like to achieve, or something you'd like to bring into your life. So I might say I want to have an intimate relationship, or I want to deepen my current relationship. I might say I want to start a business. I might say I want to learn to play the guitar. Might say I want to buy my dream car, whatever it is for you. You think about something that you really want, and just type 1 or type something in the chat box once you've thought of something. Once everyone's got something, we can proceed. So thinking about something you really want. And don't worry about, again, getting this perfect. You can be anything. This is just a practice. You can do a different one. Got it. Thanks, Lauren. So something you really want, something you'd like to achieve, something you've made. A good way of thinking about this is maybe something over the years that you've thought about. I'd like to do this thing, but I can't. Maybe it's to stop drinking. Maybe it's to stop gambling. Maybe it's to overcome an addictive behavior. Maybe it's to mend a relationship. Maybe it's, okay, perfect. Lots of people have them. Okay, so with this exercise, I'll just explain briefly, and then I'll get a song on for you, and we'll give it 5 minutes. With the Deepest Fear Inventory, we're doing something. Well, I want you to pick one, and this will be kind of counterintuitive. I recently did a podcast on inversion thinking, and with inversion thinking, what inversion thinking is I think about what I want to achieve. So let's say I want to get healthy. And rather than thinking of all the ways that I would get healthy, I write down all the ways I could be as unhealthy as possible. Because my mind is really good at finding on its head, say, what would the opposite of that be? So let's say I want to get healthy. How to be unhealthy as possible? Don't get much sleep. Don't get outside in nature. Don't move my body. Eat only processed foods. And then I flip them on their head, and that almost gives me the plan. So it's an interesting way of tackling our problems. This is kind of similar. The deepest fear inventory. Let's say I want to run a marathon. I'm going to use that as a simple one. What we'll be doing is we'll be writing at the top of the page, I absolutely refuse to, and then you're going to put whatever you wrote. So in my case, I absolutely refuse to run a marathon because I'm terrified that. That's the start of our prompt. So I absolutely refuse to, whatever you've written down is what you want, because I'm terrified that. Okay, that's the prompt. And for 5 minutes, we'll just keep the pen moving. So I'm going to give you a really quick, brief example. I might write down, I absolutely refuse to start an intimate relationship because I'm terrified that, and I just get the pen moving. I'm terrified I'll lose my freedom. I'm terrified that I won't be enough. I'm terrified people will see me. I'm terrified that a partner would cheat on me. I'm terrified that I'm just going to write for 5 minutes and get as many down on paper as we can. So, as ever, going gentle with this. If you feel you've enough done already today, or you don't feel like doing it right now, honor yourself and do what you need. So there's no pressure with any of this stuff. But keeping the pen moving is key. So 5 minutes. Let's begin now. You don't even need to write the start of the stem if you don't want to.
Is the light of truth.
So I absolutely refuse to have whatever you said you wanted because I'm terrified that. 5 minutes. If you get stuck, something that you can do that's quite nice is to put your pen in the other hand and to write with the other hand.
Sometimes we have to be rendered desperate. We're just made empty. Sometimes when we are curious, we learn. When we are desperate, we discover.
And so again, if there's any judge character in your mind that's worried about getting this right, you don't have to get this right, just got to keep the pen moving.
Living from the inside out rather from the outside in.
There's no wrong answers, no silly answers. There can be some dirty water, but if you keep the pen moving, you'll get to the good stuff.
And I feel very often we can live just on the surface of the potential of our existence.
Just 2 minutes left on this.
What if you don't touch any thought about what is past? Just leave all was past. And the concept of next, if you don't touch next or past, and in the present moment, don't hold to any shape, then discover what really is here. What really is here. You come to recognize the inherent stillness that is synonymous with your natural being. In just putting the attention here in the heart of your own awareness, magically, mysteriously,
And the last minute here.
Things begin to orient themselves within your being. You are rooted in your own self-awareness. Rooted in that inner stillness. The dance of personhood appears to eclipse this knowing in you. Which is more than a knowing, it's a knowing being.
That's 20 seconds or so.
It's a oneness in that. It's a oneness in that.
Okay, and again, dropping the pen. We'll just take 3 nice breaths. So again, dropping the pen. We're gonna feel the feet on the ground. Nice big breath in through the nose. And let go at the side and move the body if you want to move the body. Second breath in. And one more nice breath in. Okay. So again, shares very much appreciated. Just around that little exercise out, and you'll be jumping further into that in the workbook. What, if you're comfortable, there's no pressure, of course. What did you want, and is there one unconscious fear or many unconscious fears that you're like, oh wow, okay, I didn't see that there. I didn't recognize that. So this is again unearthing some of the unconscious. Maybe there's lots of junk on the page, but maybe there's something like, oh, it's the reality of creating something new in our lives is we've got to let go of parts of ourselves, or we've got to let go of aspects of how we currently live. And again, adolescent psychology or child psychology is maybe the illusion that we can have it all. But we can't always have it all. There's the idea, this is the word decision. And decision comes from the root of incision, or the root of suicide or homicide, which is to cut off from or to kill. And so when we want something, we have to kill off the other opportunity, the other potential. So to bring something new in, I've got to let go of something else. So to start a business, maybe I've got to let go of my obsession with what other people think of me. To start a relationship, I've got to let go of some of my childlike tendencies or my behaviors or whatever it might be. So clarity came through around some decisions I'm trying to make. I was surprised by the word deserve coming up, what I don't deserve. I just don't feel good enough. Again, my vulnerability will be exposed. I won't have any support. That I'm a failure in love. Didn't see that coming. So again, these are all old beliefs. These are all old paradigms. Fear of being too vulnerable in case somebody else will confirm what I think about or tell myself. Really interesting. I'm just, how do I verbalize this? I feel it. I feel a thought. I'm just trying to put words. It's funny how we'll have beliefs about ourselves, and then the fear is that somebody else will confirm what we believe about ourselves. I don't know if that makes sense. Probably an obvious thing to say. Useful exercise, yes or no, in the chat box. It doesn't have to be yes. Terrified of making the wrong choice. Loss has come up a lot. Fear of pain and loss and not being enough. Cool. Great. Okay, good to hear. So again, we're kind of unearthing and hopefully making a bit more sense. You know, like there's parts of us that want something, and then there's parts of us that seem to just constantly self-sabotage or trip ourselves up. And we could beat ourselves up. We could say we're not consistent, we're not decisive, we're not any of these things. We could say, oh, we could beat ourselves up in that way. We could judge ourselves. Or we can bring this curiosity to, okay, there's a part of me, part of my identity. We think about the power of identity, how we see ourselves. Someone who's vegan doesn't go to a restaurant and battle with themselves about whether or not they'll have steak. They're very clear on who they are. And so that impacts the actions they take. When I believe that I'm vegan, or when I know that I'm vegan, I don't eat meat. Versus maybe kind of being on a training plan and going to a restaurant and them saying, do you want dessert? And I'm like, I'll have a look. How I see myself will have an impact on how I act. And so by unearthing and recognizing some of the ways we see ourselves and hopefully being able to rewrite some of those scripts, it can have a big impact. Okay, great work, everyone. Next piece we're going to look at, hope the pace is okay for everyone today. As ever, I see these sessions as kind of introducing the concepts, and then the next piece is the workbook. So we touched on this with the inner child workshops for those that were at the inner child workshops, but and developing more of a map in terms of the mind-body connection. So the mind-body connection, again, hopefully we're starting to see that. Actually, I want to do one more piece to kind of make this a bit more real. Okay. This is, yeah, we can do this. So if you look at your list of fears, the unconscious fears that have come up for you, it's an example there: change of career, fear of judgment, failure, and loss of identity around current work. Okay, so if you look at your list of fears and you pick one of the fears that carries a bit of energy for you. So as you look at the page, you'll know which one, if there's one. And if you don't know which one, just trust yourself and pick one. That fear. Okay, keep that fear in your mind. We're going to do a short piece. So again, I invite you to close the eyes like we did at the start of today's session and just start to bring your attention into the body. Feel the feet on the ground. And bum on the chair. Let your shoulders fall away from your ears. Let your breath be deep. So nice breath in through the nose. Nice breath out. Take a couple of nice nourishing breaths. And in your body, just scan the body, see if you can find a place that feels safe and welcoming. Bring your attention to wherever feels safe and welcoming. Sometimes we feel fear, we feel sadness, but there's often another place in the body that feels safe and homely. You might bring your hands to that space and just breathe into that space. It feels safe and homely. As you breathe in, feel the space getting a little bigger. And now I'm going to invite you to bring to mind the fear. So bring to mind whatever the fear is that brought your attention or took your attention. What was your fear on the page? And as you think of that fear, you bring that fear to your mind. Notice what's happening in your body. So try not to think too much here. Just listen to your body. So notice where in your body the fear lives. And again, try to park the idea of getting this right. It's a different way of working here. So just notice, can you feel where in your body this fear lives, this belief that I'm not enough or that I'll be judged or rejected? Whatever the fear is, where does it live in the body? And see if you can bring your attention to that part of the body and just get curious about the sensation in the body. Is there a shape or a color? to the fear. Can you notice a size of the fear? Where does it live? What does it look like? How does it feel? Is there a heaviness or what's the sensations? And we're going to ask that part of the body. So we're speaking to the body here. And we're just listening, not thinking, talking to that part of the body. Just asking that part of the body, what is it that you want me to know? What is it that you want me to know? And then asking that part of the body, what do you need from me? What do you need from me? And just notice as you listen to this part of the body, is there any change in the shape or the color or the texture? Or is there any movement in the sensations around this thought or this belief, this fear? And then you can bring your attention and your hands now back to the safe place in the body, wherever felt safe and homely. Again, breathing into that space. Again, feel your feet connected to the ground. Your bum resting in the chair, and just bring some gentle movement back into the body. And when comfortable and ready, you can start to open the eyes and again, just scan your environment a little bit before coming back to the screen. And if there's anything you'd like to share in the chat box, it's very welcome. Even sharing if that was easy or difficult for you, that can be very difficult for a lot of people when they first try that kind of way of operating. So this is listening to the body. We said the body remembers what the mind forgets. The body remembers what the mind forgets. So it can feel a little bit out there, a little bit different to think about listening to something that isn't the intellectual mind or the cognitive mind. It's a rising sense of emotion, shed some little tears randomly. Yeah. So like I mentioned at the start of the call that oftentimes if we don't transmute our pain, we transfer our pain. In other words, if we don't allow space for these different parts and listen, we can oftentimes do things to numb ourselves or to transfer our pain onto others or act out in unconscious ways. If you didn't quite click or resonate with that exercise, don't worry. Nice. So someone connected with the fear of failure. They said that they were scared. They needed you to be patient and to learn or to listen. Nice. Again, don't stress if that didn't quite click for you. Okay, final piece for today. Yeah, it's a different way of operating for sure. So it can be kind of illuminating, and it can be a little bit edgy because we let go of that sense of control of, again, the persona or the shadow that has it all figured out and kind of knows what's wrong or knows why, things are the way they are. But then we come into the body, and again, there's that implicit memory. A lot of Gabor Mate's work, if anyone's familiar with Gabor, is around that same idea. So usually when I do those sessions with people, the compassionate inquiry sessions, you have people think about something they're challenged by. You might say, I'm challenged by saying no. Come into the body, notice where you feel that fear of saying no, and then go back in time, staying connected to that part of the body, and think about your first experience of being afraid to say no. And this is one of the ways gap work works. Okay, final piece for today. Is it just me, or does the time fly? I always say that doing corporate work, it doesn't feel as fast when I'm in corporate work. The mind-body connection. Okay, so again, if you did inner child, you'll have touched on some of this, but we go more refined now today. So today we've talked a bit about, and we've done a little bit of exercise around coming into the body, getting a bit more attuned to the body. We said that reactivity, emotional disturbance, emotional discomfort is a bodily based thing. It's not in the mind, it's in the body. Earlier I mentioned how, our thoughts can impact how we feel. Our thoughts can impact how we feel. But actually the opposite is also true. How we feel can impact how we think. In Western psychology, the focus is on how our thoughts impact how we feel. But with a different approach of a body up or a bottom up approach, we think about how what's going on in the body has an impact on how we think. So we're going to outline this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the nervous system and map it out a little bit. I haven't left myself a huge amount of time to cover this, but I can certainly stay on a little bit longer at the end if people have questions or need clarification. So there's a concept of polyvagal theory. Don't need to get too caught up in these words. But effectively what we're looking at is the mind and the body are intrinsically linked and connected. Again, my thoughts impact how I feel, my feelings impact how I think. There's that two-way conversation happening at all times. Example, if I think that I'm not enough, it will have an impact on how I feel in my body. If I think that I'm being judged, there might be fear, and that fear will show up in my body. But equally, if I don't sleep well and I drink an awful lot of caffeine and my body is very stimulated, this will impact how I think. It'll impact how I see the world. So polyvagal theory effectively tells us that we are constantly scanning our environments. Unconsciously to ourselves, we're scanning 3 environments actually. We're scanning what's going on in our body. So without us having to think about it, our nervous system is noticing our temperature, our breath rate. It's noticing tension in the body. It's noticing many different facets of what's happening in the system. So that scanning is happening within our bodies. We're also scanning our environment. So through the senses, we're picking up on smell, we're picking up on sight, we're picking up on hearing, we're picking up on touch. So we're scanning through our environment. And then the third place that we're scanning is in relationship to other people. Okay, so in relationship to other people. So our nervous system, which is through the spine and linking the body and mind, is constantly scanning our environment. It's 3 environments: what's going on in my body, what's going on around me, what's going on in relation to other people. And based on all that it picks up, and this is unconscious, so this is why this is important in the shadow. It's unconscious. Can't do shadow work just with the mind. A lot of it's the body. This is unconsciously happening. And based on what's happening in my body, in my environment, and in my relationships, and based on my past and my history and how I see the world, my nervous system will either decide that I am safe and everything's good, or, so I'm going to call that green light. So it gives me the green light. I'm safe, all is well. Or it'll say, okay, maybe not so safe. There's some elements of danger here. And in this state of danger, we go into a mobilized state. So by mobilized, what I mean is that we start getting energy coming into the body. So you think about when you're stressed, there's a buildup of energy. Fight or flight. So mobilized is fight or flight. Actually, instead of making that red, I'm going to make that orange. If I can. Yeah. So this is the orange state, mobilized, fight or flight response. Okay, fight, flight. And if we spend a long, long time in a fight or flight response, we obviously get burnt out because there's a lot of energy there. Or if we scan our environment and we feel completely overwhelmed by what's going on around us, in us, within our relationships, we can go into a red zone, which is immobilized. Immobilized. Quick yes, if this is making sense thus far. So immobilized is, rather than fight or flight where there's a lot of energy, there's freeze or there's fawn. Great. Thanks for the feedback in the chat box. I appreciate it. Great. Okay, cool. So we got these three states. Safe, mobilized, immobilized. All of these are useful. All of these serve a purpose. When I'm in a safe state, I can be social, I can be connected, I can be enthusiastic, compassionate, curious, I can have perspective, I can look at things, I can see the world through a certain lens. So if you're doing this workshop today and you're feeling grounded, you're feeling safe, hopefully the bit of breath work that we've done, the couple of deep breaths that we've taken throughout the session have brought you back to this state consistently, the safe state. Sometimes when you look at something challenging or experiencing something challenging, again, there's a response within the body that says there's some danger here. And so the body responds by giving us some energy, some of this fight or flight energy. The muscles get a little bit tighter. The breath gets a little bit more shallow. The heart rate increases a little bit. The body is responding in a stress response by saying, maybe there's a bit of danger here. I need the resources. My resources start to be channeled. Okay. So maybe every now and then in the workshop, you feel a little bit of this. Oh, it's not comfortable to look at this. I feel a little bit agitated. I feel a little bit. But when we do our deep breaths and when we look after ourselves and when we take a few moments and we get up and we shake and we move about, hopefully we get back into this safe state. Now, if I'm in a chronic state of stress throughout my life, or if things get too overwhelming again, I'll end up in this shutdown. So all this being said, these are three different states that we will all experience at different times in our life, and they all serve a purpose. Safe and social allows me to be connected and in a good place, allows me to be forward thinking, think about my future, look at things objectively, take a step back, etc., etc. Mobilized, mobilized is good energy. Sometimes we need that energy to get us up and get us moving, get us to the gym, get us hitting deadlines. It's more of an energetic, we come into this energy when we wake up in the morning. And immobilized is useful when we need to just, this is responsible for digestion and other features. We don't do about that for now, but effectively what I'm saying is these three states are all really useful. But what's really important is that we're able to move between the different states. Okay, so sometimes I'm in safety and then I notice I feel a bit agitated, but I want to be able to come back to safety. So maybe I'm stuck in a frozen state and I'm struggling to get moving. I want to be able to shift into this. I want to be able to get a bit of energy into me. So I feel shut down. I want to be able to energize myself. And so a healthy nervous system, a healthy mind-body connection is one that can move between different states, depending on what we need. If I'm stuck in this safe and social all the time, and someone comes and runs after me and threatens me, I'm not going to be able to run away because I can't get into this state. If I'm stuck in a shutdown state, I can't get up and move and can't get things going. If I'm stuck in an anxious state, everything looks different in my world. So all this being said, what we'll be exploring this week in the workbook, final piece, is we'll be looking at, and I'm going to put the workbook immediately, I'm going to press publish immediately at the end of the set so you get immediate access. What we're going to be exploring is your nervous system. So everybody's got a different nervous system depending on their background. So if you think about those three zones, so we had green zone, we had orange zone, and we had red zone. Green zone is safe and social. Orange zone is fight or flight. So kind of energy. Oh, my pen's going on me again. And then red zone is freeze or fawn. Freeze or fawn. So if we think about these three states, we want to get clear and we want to understand ourselves better. It's really important to start to understand what's going on in each of these states so that I can know where I am and how to move between different states. So effectively what we'll look at this week is when I'm in a safe and social state. So when you think about when you're in a good place, when you're feeling grounded, when you're feeling enthusiastic, when you're feeling open, when you're feeling rested, when you're feeling yourself, your best self, if you will, you're going to be looking at, how do I know that I'm in this state? So what happens in my body? Please share in the chat box if you've got any examples of what happens in the body when you're in a grounded and rested state. A couple of shares on this would be great. For me, my body I feel safe to be in my body. I feel grounded. I feel in my body. I don't know if that makes sense, but when I'm stressed, I feel very much in my head. But when I'm grounded, I feel more in my body. My breath is full. Yeah, safe and grounded in my body. Relaxed face, calm breath, lovely. Relaxed, flow, calm, at ease. Brilliant. So we're going to explore what happens in our body. Ease. Yeah. The next thing but I hope this makes sense. This is me feeling safe on the top. Okay. Me feeling safe. But once I start picking up on signs of danger, which again come from my environment, come from my body, come from my relationships. So a really simple example. If I'm feeling in a good place at the start,